Hi everyone. I wanted to respond to a comment left by FraterChaos on one of my recent videos on secular morality. First, I did just want to say before I continue, I hope that everyone can respect that I'm certainly willing to let my mistakes ride and stand on the record. I'm not going to be, deleting any videos regardless of the outcome of this discussion. Even if I were to completely change my position, I would leave these videos up. I think they're instructive, and I think some of the dialogue there has actually been very informative. In the comments section, a lot of people have brought up some great ideas and some great things to consider and that sort of thing. So regardless of what happens, I'm going to leave all these videos up, and I really do appreciate everyone engaging with me in the comments section. And the main reason I want to respond to Frater is, one, I'm kind of not feeling like typing. It's been a long day, but also because I think there's a couple of things here that are worthy of discussion. So at some point, Frater had said, either way, the impression I get, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it seems to me that you are arguing for the existence of objective morality. And I would say I sort of am. I feel like it probably exists, but obviously I don't know. So I'm arguing for its potential, I guess you could say. And then I have to ask again, in what units do we measure the rightness or wrongness of moral choices? Well, that would be to be determined, right? That'd be TBD. What instruments do we use to measure morality? If it is truly objective, it must exist apart from ourselves and therefore must be a real thing. That's what objective means. Well, not necessarily, I don't think. It doesn't have to be a thing. There are objective truths that we have reasoned. So I'm not sure that I would say it has to be a physical object, obviously. It must be detectable, measurable, and demonstrable. A logical argument won't cut it because the premise could be wrong and the logic could still be flawless. Well, we have other reasoned arguments that we don't necessarily question. I mean, we question them. They are held to scrutiny, but we don't act as though the very ground beneath our feet is shaking. And I'd said, well, we're never really 100% sure of anything. That doesn't necessarily remove its utility. Could we ever be 100% certain? And he went on to say, and I think this is where we get into something that's a good point to ponder. He says, in a way, I think you've actually hit on what may be the best argument against objective morality already yourself. As I said, can we ever be 100% certain? Are we 100% certain of anything? And Frater said, no, we cannot be 100% sure of anything. All of our ideas and concepts, and even the language we use to express those ideas, are all subjective. I cannot even know if you understand what I am saying in the actual manner I meant it to be understood. Each of us is locked inside our own skulls and cannot know what is in another person's head, nor even what lies in the empty space outside our minds. Is reality even real? Since we can never be certain of anything, we surely cannot make any sort of moral judgments that apply outside ourselves and our opinions and beliefs, because we do not know if they do, and frankly, cannot know. He went on to say, well, let me just answer that first, I guess. There's no utility in that. I mean, we're heading towards solipsism, and there's no utility in that. And again, you don't live that way, right? You still speak, regardless of I think you've got a pretty good idea, right? Tell me, if I'm relaying this back to you now, does it sound like what you said, right? Something is being relayed back and forth here. I don't see any utility. It's sort of like when we get into these, it's funny because when we talk with presuppositionalists and they say, how do you know you're not strapped face down on a stretcher, right? Well, then the arguments are made. Well, how do you know you're in the right reality? Well, what I do know is this is the reality I'm faced with, and all I can do is, right? So we'll argue that way when we're talking to a presuppositionalist, but when we're talking about this now, we're suddenly, Cy Ten Bergenkate would have a field day with that, right? You don't live that way, and there's no utility in it. And I would suggest that there's no point in making those arguments, because when it comes to all of the things that you would say we have no way of knowing for sure, you still conduct yourself in a certain manner. And so you're relying on those things. You're relying on what you perceive to be a bunch of objective truths. And you have ways of getting some feedback as to whether that's not whether or not that's the case. So I'm not sure. I mean, if you're going to say that, then you need to extend that all the way to, as you said, is reality even real? Well, then why engage at all, right? So he went on to say, some things do seem to have a sort of, let's say, necessary morality. Well, that kind of counters what you said earlier. And I love you, man. You have to know that. So none of this is meant to be personal, just critiquing the comment. But I would say that it is based entirely on evolution and our status of being a social species and the evolutionary benefits of acting in ways in which we can then label them as moral or good or whatever. And I would say, even making that sentence sort of is an indication. Once again, it sort of betrays that you don't really believe or follow or live the way you said earlier, that we have no way of knowing, so therefore we can't know, so how can we make moral judgments? And then you continue to make these moral value statements, right? So there's an inconsistency there, which is the point that I've been trying to make all along, is that, when we do this, we're not being consistent. Yeah. To continue. It enhances the possibility of our survival if we cooperate. If we do as little harm to one another as possible, and so forth. And there are always exceptions to these conventions as well. Sometimes we might deem it beneficial to put someone to death if that person is obviously an unredeemable danger to all of society, and we can't even agree on that. Morals are so fluid from person to person, culture to culture, and time and place to time and place that I can't see a way to reconcile that with a concept of objective morality except to claim that most humans are getting it wrong most of the time. Otherwise, there would be far more agreement on what is moral. Well, in a way, I think you've just hit on the potential solution or the potential argument against subjective morality, if it is an argument from a fact. It's not an argument for objective morality, but I think it's an argument for the benefits of objective morality, right? I think that is an argument for the benefits of objective morality, that we can seem to agree on all these things over time and space and amongst different cultures and societies, etc. And that's why I think it's important to look for it if it exists, right? And getting back to saying that logic won't cut it, that we couldn't, that a reasoned argument for objective morality wouldn't cut it because we could get our reasoning wrong. I think that's a cop-out, actually. To then extend it to saying that we can't be 100% certain, we can't even know if reality is real, therefore don't even try, but then make a bunch of value statements about evolution and cooperation and that sort of thing. If you can make all those value judgments, then you could reason an argument, right? If you're accepting some objective truths like reality is real and you can communicate and there is a scientific method and it has uncovered a theory of evolution and you have uncovered, societal moral evolutions and things like that, then you can also rely on objective truths enough to seek the potential for an objective moral standard if it exists, if for no other reason than the massive benefits that it would provide to humanity in terms of, ending a lot of conflict, I think. Not immediately. Someone else had talked about this. Do you think, sort of like you could flick a switch? No, absolutely not. There's too many damaged brains in the world, right? It would take time, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And I think possibly a comment that you made in another section alludes a little bit more to this, and that is you basically said that you don't like the idea of it. You don't think it exists, but that's essentially an opinion. And I think that's honest, and that's a good thing. I don't fault you for that. I think that's really, really great. But I mean, that kind of self-knowledge is important to know sort of the why you're resistant to the possibility, right, that morality is actually objective. But very interesting, and again, there's the inconsistency is what bothers me about your comment, Charles, right? That's what bothers me about your comment. we don't argue that way when we're talking to presuppositional apologists, and suddenly we argue differently when we're talking about secular values. That's kind of interesting. I appreciate your comment. I hope I'm not overstepping any bounds by making this in video format. So maybe what I'll do is, before I set this public, I'll just turn it unlisted. I'll let you know privately, let you watch it, view it. If you don't want me to release it public, I won't. I'll skip it. But I said earlier that I really appreciate you engaging with me, and I do, and I appreciate you all. Thanks very much. It's been an interesting few days. Take care.